Let's take a look at 15 70s albums that were supposed to be blockbusters but ended up being big, baffling flops. Some albums were hyped to the heavens, huge names, big budgets, glossy ads, and record labels betting the farm. But once the needle dropped, the air went out of the room. Paul McCartney and Wings, Wildlife, 1971. Man, when this one dropped, Paul McCartney forming a new band after the Beatles, it was huge. Everyone was waiting to hear what Wings would sound like, and the excitement was real. But then Wildlife came out, and, well, a lot of us just stared at the turntables wondering what happened. Well, I'll tell ya. Paul recorded the entire thing in just over a week. He barely rehearsed, and boy, you can hear it. Tracks like Mumbo, Big Bop, it sounded more like noodling than songwriting, and it just left fans scratching their heads. And the critics, well, they weren't shy. Words like lazy, unfinished, they got thrown around, and honestly, I can't argue. I mean, sure, it sold a bit just because it had Paul McCartney's name on it, but it dropped fast once people actually heard it. Now, to be fair, there are a couple bright spots. I'm talking Dear Friend, it's tender and heartfelt, especially if you were a fan of the Beatles and knew about the tensions between him and John at the time. Ooh, and some people know, it's nice and floaty, but overall it just felt like Paul had something to prove, but instead he just gave a shrug. The Rolling Stones, Goat's Head Soup, 1973. When you drop an album like Exile on Main Street, you raise the bar so high it's almost unfair. So when Goat's Head Soup came out in 73, fans expected another gritty, genre-hopping masterpiece. The build-up was wild, giant promotional posters, a glamorous release party in Jamaica, and a world tour to follow. I mean, this was supposed to be the next classic. Instead, what we got, felt sleepy. The lead single, Angie, was a chart topper, sure. It's beautiful, it's haunting and heartfelt, but it wasn't the explosive opener people expected. It set the tone for an album heavy on slow grooves and light on swagger. Jagger himself later admitted, quote, "It's not an album that's terribly cohesive." I mean, Keith Richards echoed that vibe, calling it a marking time record.
Strung out and hairy because I think it's the thing to do. Well, it isn't the thing to do for the engineer, I can assure you.
And critics also weren't kind. Rolling Stone magazine called it a muddle at the time, and fans who fell in love with the raw energy of Sticky Fingers and Let It Bleed were left scratching their heads. I mean, the vibe just felt off, like the band was drained from the chaos and brilliance of their earlier run. Some blamed the environment, recording in Jamaica's tropical heat. With added legal troubles and personal drama in the mix, it didn't exactly inspire fire. But here's the thing, it still sold like crazy at first. Name recognition alone pushed it to #1 in both the US and the UK. But replay value, that's where it stumbled. Let's be honest, it faded from the spotlight faster than any Stones album in years. That said, it's not a total loss. Winter is one of Mick's most underrated vocals, I think. It's dreamy and do-do-do-do-do heartbreaker. It brings some funk and fire. There are glimmers of greatness scattered across the soup, but it just never quite simmers. Honestly, it just felt like the Stones were coasting for the first time, and coming off such a legendary streak, that kinda stung. You kept waiting for the album to kick into gear, and for a lot of fans, it just never did. ABBA, Voulez-Vous, 1979. So after Dancing Queen, you would have thought ABBA could walk on water, and that song was everywhere. Weddings, radio, school dances, you name it. So when Voulez-Vous came out a couple years later, people were expecting knockout after knockout every song. And what we got instead was a whole lot of disco glitz and not much soul. They really leaned hard into the dance scene on this one, which wasn't everyone's flavor. Recorded part of it in Miami, brought in session players, went all in on the shiny production, but most of it just didn't stick. Even the title track felt like they were trying too hard. And Does Your Mother Know? It was catchy, but kind of forgettable. I mean, yeah, it sold okay, but back then anything with ABBA's name on it was going to sell at least a few million. These days, some folks call it underrated, but back then it was a letdown, plain and simple. Even today, it's mixed. People either love it or skip it. And even Does Your Mother Know, plus the title track, it ends up in people's crosshairs as overstated. Not a total crash and burn at all, but if fans were going in expecting the same flavor of ABBA that produced Dancing Queen, well, listeners had to adjust their expectations. George Harrison, Dark Horse, 1974. After All Things Must Pass and the groundbreaking concert for Bangladesh, George Harrison seemed untouchable. He wasn't just the quiet Beatle anymore, he was the spiritual one. So when Dark Horse dropped in late 74, paired with his massive North American tour, the buzz was electric. But the moment fans dropped the needle, something felt off. His voice, normally so calm and clear, was rough, raspy, almost unrecognizable. Turns out, George had laryngitis and was just pushing through it, trying to sing every night and finish the album at the same time. And the album itself, a scattershot. Some tracks had promise, Far East Man had soul, and the title track's funky groove had legs, but overall it just lacked cohesion. Critics didn't hold back. Rolling Stones slammed it for, quote, dogmatic lyrics and dull arrangements. I mean, even fans who wanted to love it were left wondering where the magic had gone. The problem wasn't effort. George was clearly pouring his heart into this, but it came off more like a man spiritually drained than one inspired. You see, he was going through a lot of personal drama at the time, including that famous messy end to the marriage with Pattie Boyd, and you can hear that weight in the songs. It's raw, but not in that cathartic way people were hoping for. And, well, the Dark Horse tour didn't help. Audiences were confused by the Indian classical music sets, George's hoarse vocals, and his subtle digs at Beatles nostalgia. He famously quipped on stage, quote, "Thank you, but I don't miss the Beatles, and I don't miss you either." I mean, why? No, not every song is bad. There is something noble in how personal and unpolished the album is. George was on his own path, even if it meant tripping in public. But back then, fans were stunned. We knew what he was capable of, and this just wasn't it. Honestly, Dark Horse has aged more like a curiosity than a classic. You listen, you respect the risk, and then you probably reach for All Things Must Pass instead. Led Zeppelin, Presence, 1976. Coming off the double album juggernaut Physical Graffiti, Zeppelin fans were expecting another earthquake. And what we got instead was Presence, an album recorded in just a few weeks while Robert Plant was literally in a wheelchair and Jimmy Page was burning the candle at both ends. It's not that the band forgot how to play, far from it. Tracks like Achilles' Last Stand absolutely shred, and the musicianship is tight across the board. But the entire album just feels tense. There are no acoustic ballads, no keyboards, no stairway-style moments to breathe. It is all grit and grind, and by the end, even diehards were exhausted. Now, sales were solid at first. It was Zeppelin after all, but it dropped off quicker than their previous albums, and the critics were not kind. Looking back, Presence has its defenders, and sure, it does have a lot of raw power, but in 1976, it felt like the world's biggest rock band had run into a wall. Not a total disaster, it's Led Zeppelin, but definitely not the follow-up we were hoping for. Bob Dylan, Self-Portrait, 1970. When Bob Dylan drops a double album, it's supposed to be a big deal. So, when Self-Portrait landed in 1970, fans were ready for something epic. But what they got instead, confused silence and then outrage. The first line of the Rolling Stones review said it all. Grail Marcus famously asked, quote, "What is this poop?" Yep, that's the actual quote, and they didn't say poop. The album was a baffling mix. Cover songs, crooning, off-key live recordings, and instrumentals that felt more like background noise. Gone was the poetic prophet of the 1960s. Instead, it felt like Dylan had wandered into a lounge bar in Vegas and started messing around. And he kinda admitted that years later. Dylan said he was tired of being treated like a prophet and deliberately made Self-Portrait to break that image. He said, quote, "I just threw it all together. Maybe I was just fed up." And yeah, mission accomplished. But still, it's Dylan, Copper Kettle has charm, and Alberta is oddly soothing. But as a whole, it felt like a prank, a musical shrug. Fans bought it because it said Bob Dylan on the cover, but most only played it once. Now looking back, Self-Portrait almost works as a concept, Dylan rebelling against being a voice of a generation by releasing a sloppy, unfocused mess. Now, it's got a cult curiosity today, especially after the 2013 Bootleg series release, Another Self-Portrait. It gave some of the tracks a second life. But back in 1970, it was a head-scratcher of legendary proportions. You didn't listen to Self-Portrait and wonder what Dylan was thinking. You listened and thought, I hope he's not broken. Fleetwood Mack, Tusk, 1979. After Rumors, Fleetwood Mac could have recorded themselves snoring and it would have gone platinum. That album was a monster. I mean, everybody owned it. Everybody played it. So when Tusk came out in 1979 with a $1 million plus price tag and a double LP of new material, the buzz was massive. But what we got was something way stranger than anyone expected. Tusk! Why? Well, Lindsey Buckingham took the reins and steered the band into experimental territory. Tape loops, jittery rhythms, and even marching band drums on the title track. It was bold, no doubt, but radio stations didn't know what to do with most of it. Now, the album still hit number 1 in the UK and number 4 in the US, and eventually sold around 4 million copies. But compare that to the 40 million haul of Rumors, it felt like a letdown. Now, actually, the critics were split, and fans were confused. Some even returned it, thinking it had to be a mistake. Looking back, Tusk has earned a ton of respect. It really was ahead of its time in a lot of ways. But in 1979, most folks were expecting warm harmonies and breakup anthems, not tape experiments and left turns. I mean, do you remember this one? Did you have Rumors and then Tusk? Get in the comments and let me know your thoughts. Ringo Starr, Ringo IV, 1977. You've gotta love Ringo for always swinging big, but in 1977 he swung way outside his comfort zone. With Ringo IV, the former Beatle dove headfirst into disco. Yikes. Picture this, Ringo in gold chains, open shirts, curly chest hair, and falsetto vocals. It had all the glitz, but not the grooves to back it up. The album was a full pivot. No songs were actually written by Ringo himself. A new writing team and glossy production meant to cash in on the disco craze. The trouble, well, it didn't sound like Ringo at all, and fans could immediately feel that. Critics panned it hard. Rolling Stone called it, quote, a staggeringly poor record. And yeah, most of the public agreed. It barely cracked the US charts and completely flopped in the UK, his home turf, and yeah, that hurt. Even longtime fans who stuck with him through his charming solo run, Photograph Anyone, were kinda left puzzled. The songs just didn't stick, and Ringo's usually easygoing vibe felt stiff and forced. He later admitted the disco experiment was a misstep. He joked, quote, we tried to go in a different direction. Unfortunately, it was the wrong one. Now look, we all rooted for Ringo, and we still do, but this one just did not land. It wasn't just a commercial failure, it was the moment a lot of people quietly tapped out of his solo journey. Alice Cooper, Muscle of Love, 1973. Listen, after the blockbuster success of Billion Dollar Babies, many of us expected Alice Cooper to keep riding high. But instead, Muscle of Love slipped into record stores in a plain, quirky cardboard sleeve, complete with a printed-on stain, and it pretty much stained everywhere. So why? Well, Alice and the band ditched longtime producer Bob Ezrin, and they quickly replaced him with Jack Richardson and Jack Douglas. Even core guitarist Glenn Buxton wasn't on the final recordings, which of course robbed it of some of that hard rock grit. Musically, it shifted between styles, hard rock, Broadway-infused ballads, even proto-disco sprinkles, but mostly it just sounded scattered. Critics were mixed, some praised the experimentation, but others said the band had lost its focus. It peaked at number 10 on the US Billboard 200 and number 34 in the UK. Decent numbers, but a noticeable drop from the platinum glow of its predecessor. Sales ended up gold certified, but for a band fresh off #1 albums and international superstardom, this kind of felt like a real stumble. The title track and Crazy Little Child, it still grabs ears today, but as a whole, the record felt like a last gasp before the group's breakup. Billy Joel, Street Life Serenade, 1974. Coming off Piano Man, Billy Joel was riding high. He'd finally broken through with a signature hit and had people paying attention. So when Street Life Serenade dropped in '74, expectations were high, and then it kind of fell. Now, the album wasn't bad, but it definitely wasn't Piano Man Part 2. Billy himself would later call it a rush job. He was touring constantly, exhausted, and short on fresh material. So much so that 2 of the 9 tracks were instrumentals. One of them, Root Beer Rag, is a fun little roller coaster of ragtime jam, but fans weren't exactly looking for a quirky filler. I mean, we just had Piano Man. We wanted lyrics, we wanted storytelling, something big, and instead the album felt distant and a little half-baked. Now, the lead single, The Entertainer, sure has its moments. It's Billy Joel at his snarkiest, taking shots at the music industry. He said, quote, "It was a beautiful song, but it ran too long. If you're gonna have a hit, you gotta make it fit." Looking back, it's clear this was a transitional record. Billy still finding his studio footing. He would move to New York soon after and regroup with a better band and a better focus. Street Life Serenade, it's not awful by any means, but in a discography full of heavy hitters, this one's the forgotten middle child. Manasses, 1972. The buzz in 72 was big. Stephen Stills, fresh off the Crosby, Stills and Nash train, rolls out a full-blown supergroup with Chris Hillman, Dallas Taylor, Al Perkins, and more. Fans were whispering, this could be CSNY Americana squared. Manasses hit in April as a 2-record set filled with blues, country, folk, Latin, and rock, basically everything Stills had ever touched. The hype was huge. When it hit the shelves, the album skyrocketed to number 4 on Billboard and went gold within weeks. A solid commercial victory, yes. And critics were generally favorable too. Even Cream, not exactly a fan of country rock, had good things to say. But behind the scenes, things were fraying fast. Recording sessions were chaotic, initial studio staff walked, the mix of styles made for a jumbled listening experience. Even Atlantic Records got cold feet about the track list. And touring soon hit snags due to Stills dropping everything for a surprise CSNY reunion push. By the time a second album, Down the Road, showed up in 1973, things were unraveling. Manasses never hit those early heights again. Sales fell, the band dissolved, and Stills was left juggling his own legacy and a fractured supergroup dream. So was the entire Manasses a flop? Not exactly. The album didn't bomb, but for a project so hyped as the next big thing, it felt like it slid into the shadows, eclipsed by Stills' other ventures and wandering momentum. The Who Are You, 1978. You'd think an album called Who Are You would be The Who roaring back, sharp, wild, and loud enough to shatter windows. But by 1978, the fire was fading. Keith Moon's health and playing were in steep decline. Pete Townshend was creatively burned out. And the whole band felt like it was dragging itself forward. The title track, a certified classic, still a stadium staple, but the rest of the album felt like a band out of sync. A lot of it sounds like The Who trying to navigate the late 70s landscape, dodging punk, flirting with synths, even name-dropping disco. Tracks like Sister Disco and Guitar and Pen, they had interesting ideas, but they lacked the raw, teeth-baring energy. It was more cerebral than visceral. The album felt big and polished, but hollow in places. And the album cover was kinda poignant. Moon slumped on a chair labeled Not to Be Taken Away. He would pass just a few weeks after the release. Pete later said, "We were hanging on by our fingernails." And yet, kinda shows. Who Are You sold well. It had Name, that monster single, but it didn't have the punch of Who's Next. It was more of a grim snapshot than a triumphant return. Listening now, you can kinda hear the exhaustion between the chords. It's not a disaster, but it's not the album anyone hoped for. Back in 1978, fans expected The Who to come out swinging, and instead they sounded like a band just trying to stay floating. Pink Floyd, Ummagumma, 1969, re-promotion in early 70s. After Dark Side of the Moon changed the landscape in 1973, EMI and Harvest started digging into the Floyd archives to keep the cash flowing, of course. So Ummagumma, originally released in 1969, got a fresh promotional push, especially in the US, with new fans expecting more soaring space rock brilliance. But what they got instead was the album's studio disc, 4 solo experiments by each band member, packed with sound effects, tape loops, weird animal noises, and long stretches that felt more like abstract theater than music.
Your domain in the sky.
It was a hard pivot from what people had just fallen in love with. Critics had already called the album self-indulgent when it first came out, but now, next to Dark Side, it felt even more out of place. Sales were modest and mostly fueled by curiosity, but it quickly faded again, and many listeners who bought it in the wake of Dark Side were less than thrilled. I've gone back to it a few times, and yeah, it's interesting in a what were they thinking kind of way, but at the time it felt like the label handed fans a riddle when they were craving more of that polished emotional magic. You could practically hear people saying, "This is Pink Floyd," while trying to sit through 10 minutes of metallic clanging. Lou Reed, Metal Machine Music, 1975. This one's legendary for all the wrong reasons. When Metal Machine Music dropped in 1975, most people thought their record was broken. No vocals, no melodies, no rhythms, just 4 sides of piercing, screeching, overdriven guitar feedback, all layered into one unrelenting sonic assault. It wasn't just experimental, it was borderline unlistenable. And RCA released it like it was any other Lou Reed album, fresh off the success of Sally Can't Dance. They even printed a gatefold cover with Lou looking defiantly cool, but once the needle dropped, listeners were stunned. No Walk on the Wild Side here, folks, just 64 minutes of noise. RCA didn't know what hit them. The album reportedly sold just 100,000 copies out of sheer curiosity, before a tidal wave of returns made it one of the most refunded albums in the label's history. RCA pulled it from shelves within weeks. The UK, they didn't even bother. Now, critics loved it. No, I'm joking, they were savage. Rolling Stone called it utter garbage, fans felt trolled, and maybe they were. Lou later said, quote, "I was serious, but I was also kidding. I wanted to get out of a contract." In some other interviews, he defended it as a piece of audio art, citing inspiration from the drone music scene. But the truth is, no one really knew when Lou was messing with us, and that's kind of the point. Now, over the years, Metal Machine Music has gained a strange cult following. Sonic Youth praised it. Music academics dissected it. Reed even reissued it in 2000 and performed it live with a classical ensemble. But make no mistake, in 1975, this thing was the audio equivalent of flipping the bird to mainstream rock. I gave it a try once, side 1, side 2, side 3, I was staring at the wall questioning everything. If you've survived all 4 sides, please tell me your thoughts in the comments below. Emerson, Lake and Palmer, Works, Volume 1, 1977. Remember when ELP were the kings of over-the-top prog? By 1977, they decided to outdo themselves. Works Volume 1 was a 4-side extravaganza. 1 side each for Keith Emerson, Greg Lake, and Carl Palmer doing solo suites, and a 4th side that brought them all together. They hired orchestras, built studio temples, and basically threw everything at the wall. The tour that followed, one of the most ambitious and expensive rock shows of the decade. But ambition alone doesn't guarantee gold records. Critics slammed it as an indulgent mess, and fans felt like they were paying top dollar to watch solos nobody asked for. It sold, but nowhere near the numbers people expected from a band used to filling stadiums. And that tour, well, it nearly bankrupted the group. At one point, they were literally running out of cash midway through the run. Now, there are moments of pure mastery here. Emerson's piano work, Lake's moody ballads, Palmer's complex percussion. But as a whole, it felt like 3 mini albums padded into one. And for many, it was proof that prog rock had gone off the rails. So, what happens when hype outpaces music? Well, you get albums like these. Massive expectations, huge money, and press rollouts that promise the world. Only for the needle to drop and the room go quiet, confused, sad. These weren't just ordinary misses. They were supposed to be defining moments, and instead they became cautionary tales. Now, some of them were very bold risks. Others just missed the vibe entirely. A few still have their defenders, and I get it. But at the time, they landed with a thud, and that's what makes them fascinating to me, because when the spotlight's brightest, the fall hits the hardest. Now, I'm gonna open the floor to you. Get down in the comments section and tell me, did any of these catch you by surprise? Do you have any of these vinyls at home? Do any of you like some of these albums? Am I just wrong? Well, get down in the comments section and tell me all your thoughts, because after all, we here at Do You Remember are nothing without you. Now I hope our video wasn't a swing and a miss, so please hit that thumbs up icon if you enjoyed it. Make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss a trip down memory lane. But most importantly, from all of us here at Do You Remember, I'm Nostalgic Nick, saying sometimes the most interesting records are the ones that went completely off the rails.